Hello and welcome to my channel, and welcome to this first part of my personal top 10 of Doctor Who stories. In this part we'll be dealing with only the classic series, and of course all opinions on my own. Okay, I asked for a thunderclap on that one, but okay. Number 10 is Logopolis. Hated by some and loved by others, loved by me in particular. This story has always been in my top 10. It was written by Christopher Bidmead in 1981 and marks the end of the Fourth Doctor's reign. It also stars Anthony Ainley in his first full story as the Master. It also introduces two new companions in the form of Australian air hostess Tegan Javanka, who walks into the TARDIS by mistake, and Nyssa of Traken, who was introduced in the previous story but becomes a full-time companion in this story. The premise of the story is unbelievably simple. The Doctor, having defeated the Master in the previous story, merely wants to repair his TARDIS, and in so falls into a trap laid by the Master. It's out on DVD as part of the New Beginnings trilogy, but these stories were never really intended to be multi-part. They are very much stories in their own right. The three stories are The Keeper of Traken, Logopolis and Castrovalva. They span two series, being the ending of one and the beginning of another. So they weren't intended as a story arc initially, and it just so happens that the Master features in all three of them. But I think Logopolis is by far the better of the three. And on with number 9, and hope to get the sound effect right a bit better this time. At number 9 we have The Mysterious Planet. Now this is a 4-part serial, but it was part of a 14-part story arc called The Trial of a Time Lord. Although all 4 stories are separate, there is the running theme throughout of the trial. This is where we first meet the Valeyard, who would become such a continuity thorn in later years. Aside from the trial aspect of the story arc, in which the Doctor faces accusation of interfering with the affairs of other civilizations, the story of The Mysterious Planet is rather simple. The Doctor lands on the planet of Ravolox with Peri, and that in itself is the mystery, because Ravolox was reported destroyed by a fireball some 5 centuries earlier. Along the way we meet one of the most lovable rogues in all of Doctor Who classic history. A very river song, a male river song if you like, by the name of Sabalon Glitz, played brilliantly by Tony Selby. This character is on the whole not a nice character. He's a rogue, he's a bandit, a thief, a mercenary. But he does fight alongside the Doctor in this story and in a later 7th Doctor story. This story, and this series in fact, was aired at a time when the future of Doctor Who was very uncertain. The trial served as a fairly good analogy to the future of Doctor Who at this point. So this story isn't all it could be. Some stretches of the imagination are needed to properly appreciate what this story could have been had circumstances been different. At number 8 I've chosen The Time Warrior. From 1973 and by Robert Holmes, this story marks the very first appearance of much beloved companion Sarah Jane Smith. It also marks the very first appearance of the Sontarans, of which Strax is a member. It also marks the very first mention of the name of the Time Lord's planet as being Gallifrey. So all in all, this is a really, really historic episode or story. So there is many reasons to enjoy this story. Least of all, it has some minor comedy elements, and John Pertwee was well known before playing Doctor Who as a radio comedy actor. So it's really good to see him kind of banter in this episode, especially with Sarah Jane. At number 7, dramatic music please. The Enemy of the World. Enemy of the World was for a long time considered a lost classic, only one episode having survived. In 2013, the BBC announced that it had found the last 5 episodes and released it on DVD later in that year. This story has earned its place on my list for 2 very good reasons. The first is that Patrick Troughton plays 2 roles within this story. Not only does he play the second Doctor with his usual flair, but he also plays the antagonist, the would-be dictator of the world, Salamander. And his performance in this story is almost theatrical. It certainly blurs the lines between theatre and television. The other reason is that the story is set in the year 2018, just 2 short years away from this video being published. And it is really interesting to see the 1967's perspective, or their interpretation of what our time would have been like. At number 6, we go all the way back to the first Doctor and the 1965 story, The Time Meddler. Okay, I'm not going to lie to you, there's some proper ropey moments in this story. William Hartnell forgets his lines in one scene. The historical accuracy of the entire story is very much in doubt. But it's fun, it's a fun story. It takes place during the Viking invasions of 1066, and for the very, very first time features another Time Lord. This was the first time we'd ever seen another member of the Doctor's species, although they weren't actually identified as Time Lords during this story. So with so many ropey moments, why have I put it on my list? Why should I recommend this to you? Well, as I said, for the first time you see another member of the Doctor's race. It is also one of the very few remaining full stories that has both Stephen Taylor and Vicky as companions. It is also the first Doctor Who story, I believe, that mixed historical and science fiction. Up until that point, the science fiction elements of Doctor Who were always kept either in the present or in the future, or on other planets. This was the first time a science fiction story had been written around a historical setting. It also has a brilliant performance by Peter Butterworth as the monk. I swear those sound effects are getting worse. At number 5, we have the 5th Doctor story, Mordrin Undead. This story has a very complicated plot, which I'm not going to go into right now, but it is the first story in the Black Guardian trilogy, which spans 3 stories, obviously. Mordrin Undead, Terminus, and Enlightenment. I regard Mordrin Undead as the stronger of the 3 because you have 2 stories running at the same time. The Doctor and his 2 companions get separated in time. Nyssa and Tegan arrive in 1977 and meet the Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart, retired. They also meet the mysterious alien Mordrin. The Doctor arrives at the same place but 6 years later in 1983, and he also meets the Brigadier and a strange boy called Turlough, who is in the employ of the Black Guardian. The threat that the Doctor faces comes from both directions, both from Turlough, who is under instructions to kill the Doctor, and also from Mordrin, who is after the Doctor's regeneration cycle in order to end their suffering. I love this episode because not only do you get a brilliant performance by Nicholas Courtney as the Brigadier, the Black Guardian, played by Valentine Dyal, is deliciously wicked. And of course, as the Doctor and the Brigadier reminisce, there is an amazing amount of references to past episodes and the past Doctors, which is always good to see. At number 4, we have the incredibly creepy 7th Doctor story, Ghostlight. As well as being incredibly creepy, this story also shows a lot of the Doctor's darker side. The episode was aired in 1989, and the threat of cancellation had hung over the show like the sword of Damocles for several years. So the show's writers were trying to develop a new storyline and unravel some mystery while presenting some new mysteries surrounding the Doctor, particularly his past on Gallifrey. This is very evident in this story, as the Doctor manipulates Ace into facing her fears. The TARDIS lands in 1889 at a house called Gabriel Chase, a house that Ace would later burn to the ground. The Doctor, trying to make Ace face her fears, manipulates her, and in so doing unleashes a terrible evil into the house, the entity known as Light. The reason I like this story is because it is concise in 3 episodes. We are very much kept in the dark as to what is going on until the very last moments. We really get a feel of some of the darker side of the Doctor, some of that darker side that was revealed later in the 10th Doctor stories. The very intricate threads that tie every character together make this a very interesting story to watch, and the creepiness is very, very real. In 3rd place, I have put Genesis of the Daleks from the 4th Doctor's era. I don't really think I need to sell this story all that much. I mean, it is magnificent. It's almost a prequel to The Magician's Apprentice. Virtually everything we know about the Daleks, their origin, their creator, came from this story. Genesis of the Daleks features the first appearance of Davros. It also has Sarah Jane Smith and Harry Sullivan, who are absolutely brilliant in this episode, I think. The action never lets up, but there is humour in the story, a dark, twisted humour. And it's probably one of the only episodes where you'll get to see war and destruction from a Dalek's point of view. At the end of this story, you will wonder whether the destruction of the Daleks is a good thing or not. And you'll begin to discover a certain humanity in the Daleks, albeit an evil, twisted humanity. The Doctor could probably translate that. Let's hope we can get a fanfare for number 1. At number 2, we have another Tom Baker story, City of Death. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy writer Douglas Adams co-wrote this story, and you can tell it is ludicrously funny, extremely convoluted, and brilliantly written. As well as the 4th Doctor and Romana in her second body. This story also features Duggan, one of my favourite non-recurring characters, played by the brilliant Tom Shadbone. It also features Julian Glover as Count Scarleone, and guest cameos by John Cleese and Eleanor Bron. An alien ship implodes on primeval Earth, and the alien inside is splintered through time. All the splinters work together to ensure that the furthest in time has the resources to build a time machine to travel back in time and prevent the implosion from happening. City of Death was one of the first Doctor Who stories to be filmed abroad, being filmed in Paris for most of the location shots in and around the Eiffel Tower. And the location shots are beautiful. I cannot really recommend this story enough. It has all the flair that Douglas Adams was later show in his Hitchhiker's Guide series. It shows all the brilliance of the actors involved. And a fun fact, while on location, Tom Baker and John Cleese filmed a couple of comedy sketches. Right, before I reveal my number one, I am going to give you a couple of honorary mentions, a couple that were shifted off the list at the last minute due to I wanted to balance out the list a little bit. Silver Nemesis, 7th Doctor story, absolutely fantastic, and it was also a 25th anniversary story. Obviously, anything that has a number of Doctors in it is well worth seeing. There's the 5 Doctors, there's the 3 Doctors, and there's also the 2 Doctors, and finally Terror of the Autons, the first appearance of the Master. At number 1, my all-time favourite classic Doctor Who story is The War Games with Patrick Troughton. This epic 10-part story has everything. The first mention of the Time Lords by name, a stellar performance by Edward Brayshaw as the War Chief, and a plot so convoluted and with so many twists and turns that every cliffhanger, and 9 cliffhangers, presents a new mystery and a new direction for the story. It's almost impossible to tell you anything about the story, because the beauty of this story lies in its complexity and the fact that it will lead you into directions that you're not expecting. This is really one to watch for the very first time with no interruptions and really get into it. So I'll say, if you've never watched this story before, watch it right now. Seriously, watch it right now. You will not be disappointed. It may not be your favourite classic Doctor Who, as it is mine, but I can assure you it will be up in the top 10. And in all honesty, it's a small miracle that this story even exists at all, let alone in its entirety, considering how many missing episodes there are, and in fact how many completely missing stories there are from this era and before. That the fact that we have a complete 10-part story that has survived is fantastic. Thanks for watching this little top 10. Of course, these are all my own personal opinions, and if you don't agree with my list, well, the chances are I probably won't agree with this list either in a year or two. That's the nature with opinions. They change over time. Let's watch some bloopers, because this was a hard video to make and it wasn't without its mistakes. And of course, as the Doctor and the Brigadier reminisce, there is an amazing amount of... The reason I like this episode... Oh, fuck off! It also shows a lot of the Doctor's dark side. As well as being incredibly creepy, it shows a lot of the Doctor's darker side. As well as being incredibly creepy, this episode, this Guardian trilogy, which spans 3 stories obviously, the TARDIS lands at Gabriel Trace, a house in 18... As I said, like most Dalek stories, the plot is very simple, but Sarah Jane Smith is magnificent in this. Harry Sullivan's an idiot. My reasons for liking this episode, or this story... I keep making that mistake. Oops, did I press record? I don't remember pressing record. Where we get not 1,